A deadline to keep the government from shutting down fast approaching while lawmakers look for answers on the Trump dossier. Hello, everyone. I am Trish Regan in This Morning from Maria Bartiromo. This is Sunday Morning Futures. The Trump administration says it will go back to accepting renewal requests for so-called dreamers. What does that mean for the immigration battle on Capitol Hill? I'll be talking to Georgia Senator David Perdue, who's been in on all those talks with the White House. Also, the Trump dossier. At least one Republican lawmaker pushing to declassify the Justice Department and FBI files on the matter. What does he want to find? We'll be asking him. Congressman Ron DeSantis of the House Judiciary Committee. He joins me live. Plus, Maria sits down with J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, and she gets his take on the current state of the economy as we look ahead right here today on Sunday Morning Futures. The Trump administration will resume accepting applications for DACA renewals after a federal judge blocked the president's decision to end the program. But the program still faces a rather uncertain future. Congress is struggling to come up with a permanent solution for DACA as they also try to juggle funding for border security and Mr. Trump's long-promised wall. President Trump venting his frustration on Twitter just this morning, saying, quote, DACA is probably dead because the Democrats don't really want it. They just want to talk and take desperately needed money away from our military. My next guest took part in immigration talks at the White House just last week. Joining me right now is Senator David Perdue of Georgia. Good to have you here, Senator.
Good morning, Trish.
Is he right? Do the Democrats not really want DACA?
Well, the evidence is they've been trying to do this for a number of years without any success. 3 times in the last 11 years, we've tried to solve this immigration issue. But the president's been very clear that any solution to DACA must include border security, including the wall, an end of chain migration, and an end of this diversity visa lottery. What we had last week were 2 meetings at the White House. The president's very engaged in this issue, just like he was on tax. I'm hopeful that we have now opposing proposals that will allow us to get some symmetry in this negotiation. In my business experience, that's how you get to deals, and I still think we have a possibility to do that. Look, 72% of Americans want this to happen. They want to end chain migration. They want immigration limited to the worker, the spouse, and the immediate children in that family. And I think what we're going to do here is see, once we get past the funding deadline, which should have nothing to do with DACA, we'll move on to hopefully a bipartisan solution to DACA and our immigration system.
Yeah, but, you know, when it comes to the solution, you point out your business experience. I mean, you've got to negotiate, right? One side has to offer up something. The other side has to offer up something. And the impression we're certainly getting, at least out of the left, is that they are not willing to allow one single dollar to go to a so-called wall because the wall symbolizes everything that they, well, dislike about our president.
Well,
so how are you going to get that?
This is outrageous, actually. It's a gross distraction away from the issue. The issue is this. The Democrats have tried for years. In the Dreamer Act in 2013, Schumer and Durbin both talked about ending parts of chain migration. So we're doing things that the Democrats have voted for and have supported in the past. Just in the 90s under Bill Clinton, we had a presidential commission actually recommend an end to chain migration and move to a merit-based immigration system, more based on who you are and not where you're from. And so this is a point where most of the things we're talking about, Democrats have actually voiced some support for over time. The problem now is you've got the politics involved in Washington. That's what's so frustrating to all of us out here in the real world.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, watching that meeting, by the way, that was exciting to see. I got to tell you, just as a bystander, watching that whole thing. You were in on the meeting, correct? I mean, it was...
I was in both meetings last week in the White House, and I got to tell you, the president was pillared because he made it open to the public. I mean, this was the most open and transparent dialogue that we've ever had on immigration. And this president's instinct, I think the media was supposed to be in there for 5 or 10 minutes, Trish, and they were in there for over 55 minutes. So this president saw a need to be transparent with the American people. He wants to see that both sides, while we differ, there's enough common ground that we can get to a solution here if we have a genuine effort to do that.
Well, it certainly sounded like that. I mean, watching that meeting, again, just as a spectator, it really felt as though there might be some room for negotiation. There might be some room for some compromise. And then, you know, fast forward, and now suddenly we're back to sound bites in the media where everybody's saying that, you know, they're digging in their heels and nothing's going to get done. And I just question really whether anything can get done when we're living in such a polarized political environment. How do you break through?
It has to get done. Trish, 72% of Americans want to get this done. And this is, you know, we've limited the conversation. The president now has been successful just last week in limiting the scope of this. Look, Congress has failed 3 times in the last 11 years, Trish, because they've been too comprehensive. They tried to solve the illegal problem, the temporary work visa problem, and the legal immigration problem at the same time. What we're doing now is limiting this debate to just the legal immigration system, and I believe we can get to a solution. Look, I've been in big deals in the private sector, and I can tell you that this is a deal to get done. The natural symmetry is there to get this deal done between a DACA solution and ending this chain migration, and at the same time providing for the security of our country on our borders.
Senator, the wall itself, the president promised over and over and over again that Americans weren't going to pay for it. Now we're learning it's you know, going to cost a lot of money. And the money has to come from somewhere. Ultimately, who will be on the hook for the wall? Is it the American taxpayer?
Well, it's a great question. It's a great question. And what we have here is a proposal that came to us last Thursday from Senator Durbin and Senator Graham that would cost us, according to the Congressional Budget Office, over $26 billion. The wall right now, the president's asking for funding of about $18 billion. And right now, when you have the growing economy that we see right now, because the president said job one this year, this past year, was growing the economy, and he focused on 3 things. He focused on energy, regulations, and tax. And we've been successful moving the ball in all 3 of those areas. And we see the economy moving now. And so we get an economy going, we get trade deals done with Mexico and other countries. We'll find a way to fund that wall. It's a national security issue, Trish. This is not just an immigration issue, as we well know.
Yeah. So, you know, there's still some opportunity, I would think, there via these trade deals that can be renegotiated where we wouldn't be paying for the wall. You mentioned the economy, Senator, and I'm glad you brought that up because it looks as though, by all accounts, the economy is doing pretty great right now. You get GDP upwards of 3%. You've got record low unemployment. You've got wages going up, finally, by the way, because company after company after company, Walmart included in that group, is coming out and saying that they're going to give back to their employees, that they're raising wages, they're giving out bonuses. But, you know, there's still sort of a mentality among the left, if you would, right now, where they're not willing to praise the economy yet. Is that also, in your view, entirely motivated by politics?
Trish, if this were any other president getting the results that we're getting right now in the economy, we would be crowing about the results. 2 million new jobs created last year, 860 regulations pulled back, 500 people, bureaucrats, fired at the VA for non-performance, 300 fired at the Department of Education. Consumer confidence is up at a 16-year high. CEO confidence is a 20-year high. 123 companies decided to give year-end bonuses related to this tax deal. Trish, I tell you, this economy is beginning to move, and what we have to do now is focus on immigration and infrastructure and trade to keep moving the economy forward. Those are the priorities that this president has. Look, this president's agenda is working, and most people in America know that. So what you have now is an outcry from the left that, oh my goodness, look at all these distractions. The American people are not going to be fooled by that, and I'm very anxious to continue to get the truth out before them.
Senator, before I let you go, what happened in Hawaii?
Well, I don't know the details of that yet, but it just heightens the fact that you know, somebody made a mistake somewhere, and as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I can assure you we'll get to the bottom of that this week.
Yeah, that's scary stuff because, you know, you never know what can happen in the interim between, you know, getting an alarm like that and what our response would be.
Trish, we all grew up, I grew up in a nuclear halo, with the Soviet Union and the United States in the Cold War. And I can tell you, the world's more dangerous right now than any time in my lifetime. It heightens the fact that this president, by re-engaging with the rest of the world, in fact, is making the world safer. Look what he did with NATO. He threatened to back out of NATO as a candidate. Everybody, oh my goodness, you cannot do that. You can't even threaten to do that. Well, guess what? the NATO nations are actually stepping up now and moving forward and increasing their funding for their military.
How about that?
The president is also, how about that? The president's also moved to find funding, putting pressure on Congress to find funding to increase readiness of our own troops after 8 years of disinvestment. So the agenda is working. People are noticing that. But we have a realization that we have a debt crisis and a national security crisis that he's beginning to focus on.
He's got his work cut out for him. All right, Senator Perdue, thank you so much. Good to have you here this morning.
Thanks, Trish. Tell Maria to get better.
I will. All right, it's been certainly a week of controversy over the Trump dossier. Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis, he wants to declassify those files. Around the same time, a top Democrat released the testimony of Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson. What does Congressman DeSantis hope to learn in all of this? I'm going to ask him when he joins us next. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Sunday Morning Futures. Stay with us. Much more to come. The chairman of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Ron DeSantis, is now calling on House Speaker Paul Ryan to declassify the Trump dossier files. This comes as Senator Dianne Feinstein released the full testimony of Glenn Simpson. He's the co-founder of that firm behind the dossier, Fusion GPS. Congressman Ron DeSantis, he joins me right now. He also sits on both the Judiciary, House Judiciary, and Oversight and Government Reform Committees. Congressman, good to have you here. Where are we right now on this? Because it feels as though it's been going on and on and on and on. And we all still have a whole lot of questions, and I know you do as well. Do you feel like you're making any progress?
Well, I think we are. Actually, the Fusion GPS transcripts of Glenn Simpson testimony, I thought was really devastating to people who have been supporting the dossier. I mean, in those transcripts, Simpson claims that the FBI had an informant inside the Trump campaign. That's verifiably false. He claimed that Christopher Steele went to the FBI because he just had this crisis in confidence of what was going on. He felt he had to do it. He didn't mention that one of the top-ranking Justice Department officials, Bruce Orr's wife, worked for Fusion GPS. It's much more likely that that's the reason why the FBI got involved. And then he claimed, incredibly, that even though he personally met with that Russian attorney, Natalia Veselakaya, the day before, the day of, and the day, and the day after the Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. and Manafort, he said, well, I never knew that. We never discussed that. If you believe they never discussed that, meeting the day before, the day of, and the day after, then I got oceanfront property in Arizona I'd like to sell you. So it just wasn't a credible presentation. So I think the reason why I want to declassify this stuff is because there's been so much misinformation and disinformation put out, propagated by groups like Fusion, but also by the press, which has their narrative, and they want to further it. And I think the American people could learn the truth by just releasing the documents so that we know how all this transpired.
What do you think really happened? I mean, the concern, of course, being that possibly our government used a phony document, a politically motivated document by this Fusion GPS to then go in and wiretap the Trump campaign. Do you believe that may be the case?
So I have not been able to review the documents yet. We're going to try to get all the House members to have access. I obviously want to have access personally, but credible reports that I trust have said that this dossier was used to get surveillance. And so the question is, Trish, one, did the FBI know that this was funded by the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton? And if they did, and they still used it, without really corroborating anything, because remember, James Comey, even as late as the spring of 2017, said this thing was unverified. So why would you use it if you know it was political opposition research? But I think the flip side's also interesting. If they didn't know it came from the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, then how much due diligence did they really do on this document? Did they just take it at face value? So I think we need to know what all else was going into this. I want to know what the role of Peter Strzok, the infamous FBI agent who said we can't afford to take the risk of a Trump presidency and you need an insurance policy. He was one of the lead agents on both the Hillary case and the Trump-Russia collusion. I want to know more about the role of Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for Fusion GPS, and I want to know more about the relationship between the FBI and Christopher Steele. The answer to all those questions, I think will better inform, was this an example of the government really working with one campaign against another? If so, that's obviously very, very problematic.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, I suppose mission accomplished as far as Russia goes, because if they were feeding disinformation to us via Christopher Steele, then they've succeeded in creating this kind of chaos and lack of trust in the very thing that makes us the great country we are. George Papadopoulos, let me ask you about him, because he's now being focused on as one of the reasons why the FBI may have gotten involved in all of this. So that's a little bit of a twist and turn in the narrative, in that first we were hearing maybe it was because of the dossier. Now it's because, well, George Papadopoulos was effectively saying that there were connections with the Russians that would perhaps reveal Hillary Clinton's emails during that campaign, and that is what may have prompted them. What do you think of that story?
Well, to me, that seems like somebody's interested in putting out information to de-emphasize the role of the dossier, because I think people who may have been involved with this know the dossier is problematic, and it's not going to make them look good if they were involved in that. So I think that was put out deliberately. I mean, look, here's my thing. I don't know if it was true or not, but I can tell you that to start a major investigation based off some drunk 28-year-old talking about saying Russians have dirt on Hillary, I mean, I don't know that they would start investigations on something so thin. So in some ways, the dossier, even though it was not verified and it's really been discredited, at least it's alleging things that would be serious if true. Papadopoulos just saying, hey, we hear the Russians have dirt on Hillary. I think that would be very thin to start an investigation. So I am definitely interested in how the investigation started. I'm more interested in what was done with this stuff to spy on Americans. But I think that that's an important question, and it doesn't really make sense to me that Papadopoulos would have been the main guy. And remember, even as early as a couple months ago, James Clapper, the head of national intelligence, said he had never heard of Papadopoulos before.
No, I mean, you ask all the right questions here. I think Americans deserve answers for sure, because it's very disturbing. When we think about the Russians being able to infiltrate our system, this is one example. If they were able to put this disinformation out there where they could have really done some damage. And by the way, they kind of already have, because here we are talking about it. Anyway, I hope you get the answers you need. Thank you so much, sir. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
President Trump pushed through tax reform, so what should be next on his agenda? The CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase is giving his assessment of the brand new law and tells Maria Bartiromo what he wants to see next from this administration as we look ahead here on Sunday Morning Futures.
I think 4% is possible. Number two, remember, the Fed also has to react to what it sees. So they're not going to act not knowing what's going on. So if you have a strong economy, they'll raise rates more. But the strong economy will dwarf the effect of higher rates. So you got to look at both sides, and then selling bonds. You know, the American economy is worth $100 trillion. They're selling $10 billion a month, and that number will eventually go to $50 billion a month. Again, if you have a very strong economy, I'm not sure that's really consequential. There might be a point in time when the Fed isn't facing a favorable outcome, i.e. inflation. You know, think of 2019. Inflation is too high. They got to sell more bonds, and they're going to raise rates faster than people think. That's where it gets really tough to be the Fed. You know, not when you have a real strong economy, which gives them a lot of leeway to do various things.
So it sounds like you're comfortable with monetary policy slowly going away and fiscal policy taking center stage.
Yes.
What's the disconnect then? I mean, loan growth, just okay in certain areas. You've got an economy that seems like it's firing on all cylinders, and yet you got trading under some pressure. You got loan growth not where one would expect.
You know, loan growth that's a hard one to figure out. So part of it, when it comes to large corporations, they always have a choice. It doesn't have to go in a loan. It can go to public markets. They can get it from overseas. They can do various things. But you are absolutely right. In the middle market, where you would expect to see a little more growth today, you haven't. Again, I think it may just be a little delayed. It may just be a timing issue when we look at it in the short run. And you know, small business volume seems to be okay. Real estate's okay. So mortgages is fine. Obviously, it'll be affected by rates going up. But so far, it looks like the economy's healthy, and some of that may end up in loan growth eventually.
So how do you get more lending in housing for those lower FICO score people?
That's a great question. I've been begging our government for years that because of servicing costs were, there are 3,000, when we send you a bill for a mortgage now, in certain states, 3,000 requirements to service that mortgage. Hugely costly, hugely risky to the servicer. In addition to that, it costs more money to produce loans, and there's been so much litigation around it. A lot of the lenders have been much more reluctant to make loans precisely to lower income, lower FICO, self-employed, prior defaults. And that could be fixed very quickly. So I'm hoping, and the other thing, we have so many people involved in the housing policy. I think there's 7 regulators who actually set these policies. They got to get in a room and finish that. If they do that, the cost of mortgage will go down to Americans, and you'll make it, not only will the cost, it'll go down for everybody, but you'll also open a whole segment. In fact, JP Morgan's economists estimate that had we done what I would consider the right thing, not going back to subprime, just opening up these requirements a little bit, we might have been doing $500 billion more a year. And that alone is talking about 0.2% growth a year. And so I think that is one of the first things that the administration could do that can actually help immediately. Make mortgages more accessible and cheaper for everybody. And there's no risk to it. Okay, everything that's been written since the Great Recession has been absolutely pristine.
You're the chairman of the Business Roundtable. What does business want to see in terms of policy from this administration?
Yeah, so the first thing was competitive tax reform. And that was there. Now, you didn't see any of the BRT CEOs, at least I didn't see them, talking about individual, my personal tax. They said, we need, for America, at table stakes, competitive tax. We got that. I think the next things are on the administration's agenda. Infrastructure reform. It's complex. There's bridges and ports and highways and FAA and highway taxes and state and local, but it could be done. Permitting, as I mentioned before. Inner city school education. Something I think we can all fix, what we call smart regulation. And while we do this, we should do things to help the people in America left behind. I think it is true people are left behind. I think we should expand the earned income tax credit. I think we should do a better job in inner city school education.
But as you say, the criticism on both sides, that's getting in the way. The infrastructure plan, you think these two sides can work together and get something done?
I don't know.
Are you expecting?
But put it this way, they should. If they are Americans and they're patriotic, infrastructure, Democrats and Republicans both want.
Are you expecting to finance some of the infrastructure programs?
Yeah, but I think it's more. I mean, if you said permitting, that'll just speed up what happens. If you said the highway tax credit, that'll just get the highway tax gas bill. That'll just get more building into highways. So if we get more infrastructure, obviously financial institutions will do more financing. But we would have to change the policies and procedures to get that done.
And that's jobs.
It's jobs, and it's just like that.
Real quick on markets here. With this tax plan and the savings for corporate America, would you expect the deal flow to continue and pick up in 18 and IPOs? Obviously, that was a slow start this past year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we see a lot of M&A chatter and dialogue and activity. Most companies want to grow and expand and acquire and build and do R&D. That's most places' natural estate. The natural estate isn't to buy back stock and do dividends. And so I think you will see that. And having a competitive tax rate or growing economy will probably enhance that a little bit.
Jamie, any thoughts on rates and the fact that they're so low? I mean, the 10 years, the constant quandary?
Look, they've been lower much longer than people think, both the short run and the 10-year, and they've gone up slower than people thought. I think there's going to be a point in time they go up faster than people think. And I don't know if that now is that inflection point, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's sometime in the next 6 to 9 months. But if it's for good reason, like a strong American economy, that's okay.
A lot of good ideas there from Jamie. Well, big changes could be ahead, everyone, for NAFTA. What would that mean for the auto business? One of the industry's biggest players is joining me here live as we look ahead today on Sunday Morning Futures. I'll see you here. President Trump says he's open to extending talks with Mexico and Canada in terms of updating NAFTA beyond March and into the summer to avoid any uncertainty ahead of Mexico's presidential election, of course, in July. Now, this comes as the president previously threatened to withdraw from the trade agreement unless major changes were made in terms of the negotiations. Any changes to NAFTA will likely have a big impact on the auto industry. Carlos Ghosn is the chairman and CEO of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi Alliance and chairman of Nissan Motor Company, and he joins me right here on set right now. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Trish.
Changes to trade agreements, how does that affect the industry? How does it affect your company?
Oh, it will affect a lot. So that's why we are all extremely attentive to what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. The fact that NAFTA is being renegotiated seems a little bit normal. This is 23, 24 years old agreement. The reality of the three countries changed during the last 23 years. The fact that there is a reset for this agreement, it's fine. It's something very logical. Obviously, the outcome will have a lot of importance for all the car manufacturers because we have based a supply system on North America for the North American market. If anything needs to happen here, it will have major impact on our supply
So
system.
are you concerned that this is going to hurt your industry?
It will. I mean, it may, depending, obviously we don't know how it's going to be changed, but we will be paying a lot of attention to the outcome of the negotiation.
Well, one of the things that he's talked about is having some kind of fair trade. Free trade and fair trade are different in that, you know, if we're bringing in goods cheaply into our country, they in turn should be doing the same. In other words, he doesn't want tariffs happening on the other side. And you look to a country like China, for example, where it's a whole lot more expensive to buy an American car in China because of the tariffs that they put on. As opposed to if you were to buy it, you know, here. We don't do the same kind of thing. So when you say it's going to hurt your industry, is it really, or is it just going to change your industry?
Look, it's very difficult to assess because we don't know what's going to be the outcome. We don't know what's going to be the outcome. Obviously, it's a very important agreement. NAFTA is a very important agreement for all car makers. We all based our investments and our supply system in function of the present agreement. Now, the future agreement, if there is any future agreement, will have an impact on us. So we'll have to be patient, wait, and see. Obviously, we are in contact with the administration to explain all the pros and the cons of all the changes. We will be waiting for the outcome.
What's your thought on tax reform?
Oh, I think it's a good thing because obviously it will be sustaining economical activity. In fact, I think thanks to the tax reform, we were expecting the market to go down, the car market to go down in 2018. I don't think it will. I think it will be remaining stable, so it's going to be sustaining the activity.
So in other words, people have more money in their pockets,
Sure.
They'll go out, buy a new car.
Very
So
positive.
good for the industry.
Very positive.
Positive for the American economy.
Yes.
And does it mean at some point that you might actually, at least for any of your plants here, start paying your workers more?
Well, the fact that it is a very positive event makes us review the perspective for the year 2018 even further. And with this, decisions will be made in consequence. It's too early to say what we're going to do, but without any doubt, it's going into the right direction.
You know, Carlos, it's amazing. Company after company, hundreds of them have come out and said, we're going to give our workers a bonus. We're going to, you saw Walmart raising the minimum wage at all of its stores to $11 an hour and providing up to $1,000 in bonuses. And that's just, as I said, one of hundreds. And they're saying it's because of tax reform that they're able to do this. You know, the fear among some CEOs was that the companies would hoard the money and we'd see a lot of share buybacks and dividend plays, and that it wouldn't actually translate into much for the American worker.
Yeah.
And yet already, knock on wood, it is. Do you expect that to continue? It sounds like you do.
Yeah, I do. I do. I expect this to continue. And you are talking about the perspective also of a deal on infrastructure. This is also another potential very good news to sustain the economy. So we think presently the U.S. economy is one of the very positive spots on the planet. And this is something that industry likes, and this is something that industry would like to sustain. So if we get into a kind of virtual circle where, you know, the policy change and then companies respond to the policy change positively, this can be positive for everybody. It has to be win-win in order to be sustainable.
Jamie Dimon is predicting 4% growth.
Yeah,
Think it could happen?
Great news. Yeah, I think what he said, I followed what he said. I think this is I believe what he said. I think his logic is very solid. And this makes me more optimistic for the U.S. for 2018 and beyond.
So how would you grade the, you know, get away from the rhetoric for a second and the personality, because I understand how polarizing he can be, but when you look at the policy itself, at least as far as the economy is concerned, let's forget immigration and all the other stuff, the economic policy that's coming out of Washington, how do you grade it?
Well, as a business person, I just applaud this economy. Obviously, I can only...
And therefore the president as well?
Exactly. That you need to give the president the merit of being the main person responsible of the economy, and all the decisions which are being taken are very positive. As a business person, I applaud it.
That's a little dangerous for you to say.
No.
No, I only point that out because
I'm very factual. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I don't live here. I live between Paris and Tokyo. All my companies obviously operate in the United States. We look at it, as you said, independently of any other consideration. We look at the economy. The economy is going.
Yeah, no, but I only say that because there have been CEOs that have said similar things, and their customers go bonkers. But I think it's honest of you and fair of you to look at the policy itself and tell us what you think that policy means for our economy. Tell me about the auto show.
Yeah, well, Auto Show is going to be another good show. Obviously, it started, I mean, Detroit is one step, but before Detroit, you had the Consumer Electronic Show in Las Vegas, which was mainly about cars. I mean, we're mainly talking about cars of the future. This was about electric cars. It's about autonomous cars, driverless cars. It's about connected cars. So I think the Consumer Electronic Show was a little bit the opening salvo of the car moment that will end with the Detroit Motor Show and with LA.
It's so, by the way, I am really anxious, I got to tell you, for this driverless car because I'm not a big fan of driving. Realistically, I mean, when are they going to be for mass consumption?
Look, for mass consumption, because prototypes, you have them today already. Right. You have a lot of driverless cars being driven by
by the way, and I hear from my friends in Silicon Valley, you know, you go down the highway there to Menlo Park, and nobody's actually really doing much as far as driving goes because so much is actually automated. But, when is it really going to be for everyone?
Mass marketing, I would predict that this will come between 2021 and 2022. Why? First, because the technology is still not robust enough to face the scrutiny of the regulator. So we need to work still on the robustness. And second, we need also the regulator to accept the fact that on a mass marketing point of view, you're going to have plenty of cars without driver. So I would say prototypes are ready, 2018, 2019. We're going to continue to work on robustness of the system. 2021 would be my guess.
That's not very far away.
No, it's tomorrow.
That's great. All right, that's good news for me. And for, you know, a lot of Americans, because I think it's going to make things much safer.
Without any doubt. Without any doubt. 90%, more than 90% of the car accident due to human mistake. Driverless cars, you're going to eliminate this 90%. You have 1.4 million casualty a year on the planet.
It's tragic. Well, Carlos, thank you so much. It's good to see you. And I do appreciate that. I mean that because I think too often policy gets distorted by emotion, and we need to be fair to the actual policy, which you are, sir. Thank you. Good luck on the car show.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. A federal judge's decision leads to the Trump administration accepting DACA renewals again. Where does the immigration fight go now? We are going to ask our panel next as we look ahead here on Sunday Morning Futures. The Trump administration is once again taking applications on DACA following a federal judge's temporary injunction against the president's efforts to end the program. Let's get to our panel. Ed Rollins, he's a former campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush ticket back in 1984. He's also the campaign chairman for Arizona Senate candidate Kelly Ward. And Al D'Amato is a former New York senator. Good to have you both here. You're both Fox News contributors. Where's this thing going, Ed?
Well, I think the court, and I'm never for the court interfering with the president, but I think the court in this particular case has given them some time. The important thing here is to get the budget done and not complicated. We can't have another continuing resolution for any period of time, otherwise we seriously affect the defense budget. So my sense is get that budget done, don't do a continuing resolution, have a full-scale immigration, which may take a period of time, in which you have the security element and you have the immigration element and you have DACA as a part of that.
Do you think, Senator, that you can actually do those things in conjunction with each other, though? Because, you know, we're hearing that there's much resistance from the Democratic Party when it comes to, say, funding the border wall. And that to them is a non-starter. If there's a wall, do we not get anything else done?
Well, I think Ed's got it absolutely right. Number one, we've got to do the budget. If you don't do the budget, you are impairing hundreds of millions of people, all of the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and then the military. We just cannot afford to have the budget shut down. DACA is important. I think, you know, 80% of the American public want these youngsters to be able to have a pathway to citizenship. But if you think you're going to get it done in today's political climate, We're not. Not if you make it part of the budget process. That has to be done within the next 2 weeks. And so I say get the budget done and then concentrate on an immigration policy.
So it sounds like you guys are in agreement on this.
Oh, I think we are. I think we're two old guys who've been around the game a long time and have watched it work. And I think the only comment I'm going to make about the president has to get very careful with his words. Words matter in Washington, D.C. It's not about interpretation. It's words matter. We grew up with an old adage, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never harm you. Words harm you. And words particularly harm you when you're in a place like this. You can't be insulting people. And I think to a certain extent, this president has had an extraordinary opportunity here to move the tax bill through. The economy's moving. And he keeps stepping on his own story by these things like he did last week.
Well, you know, in his defense, though, it's challenging when you are living in such a polarized political environment. And I think that, you know, he had emerged from that first meeting last week looking pretty good because he was in control. He seemed willing to negotiate with all sides. And I just question the timing, why this was leaked.
But he
he shouldn't have said it. I hear you, but...
Eddie again is right. Maybe you only need one of us, just the Ed. I mean, the fact of the matter is that he had everything going his way. Why he had to use that language is ridiculous. Here he had the economy. The economy is booming. The story should be Walmart and the other companies that have given 2 million people bonuses of $1,000. 2 million. That you raised the level of pay from $9 to $11, and you hear Nancy Pelosi saying this is crumbs. By the way, if you're making $9 an hour and then it goes to 11, 40 hours, that's $80 a week. For those people, that's big.
Yeah.
$1,000 bonus, you may say it's crumbs, but to those people, it's big.
Well,
why do you have to use incendiary language? So the president has set back the process. No doubt about it. And he could have taken credit for this economy booming and for people already getting the benefit of the tax plan.
But, you know, Ed, you know him well, and, unfortunately, sometimes how he talks.
He's not going to change, and I think, but somehow the problem is there's nobody around him. Other presidents have had, past presidents come sort of give them a little guidance on the game. And I think to a certain extent, you talk about the meeting where he had the congressman in there. I mean, we've been in lots of meetings with members of Congress, and you don't negotiate in a cabinet meeting. You basically go in there and say, here's our position, here's what we want, have some dialogue. You don't bring the media into the show. It was a show, and it was a show with lots of conflicts. And when you say, send me any bill, I'll sign it, that's not true. No president's going to sign any bill that comes from a Congress that's split as badly as this one is. And if he does, he's a fool. And this president's not a fool. So my sense is the week people like the first part of the meeting, didn't like the later. I think this president should get very disciplined, understand what his plan is, and move forward, and he can have great success.
Well, his plan is to get some kind of deal. I mean, that's what he said. He's okay with a deal for the Dreamers, provided we get the wall and provided there's a change in our immigration policy.
It has to be.
End chain migration. You know, I think that he has to find a way to break through this partisanship.
Well, the president has to be, I'm sorry, the president has to be the court of last resort. He can't be he thinks about negotiating is, I want to sell you a bill, I want $10 million, you want to give me $9 million. That's negotiation. In Congress, every word matters. Every single thing on a piece of legislation matters.
All right. Well, good points from both of you. Stay with me. Scary moments in Hawaii, everyone. A ballistic missile. Warning. A warning.